Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And before we get to our interview today with Ernesto, let me just play a quick message from our sponsor. And
being at the epicenter of the next breakthrough in biotechnology. That moment could happen for you this October at Bio on the Bayou 2025, where Southern innovation meets scientific excellence in the heart of New Orleans. Over 300 of the brightest minds in biotech are coming together for 2 extraordinary days in New Orleans. We're talking groundbreaking research from powerhouses like Tulane, Auburn, the University of Mississippi, Xavier University of Louisiana, and LSU Health. Expect revolutionary technologies, cutting-edge research, and industry-shaping expert panels that you won't find at any other event, plus networking opportunities that could transform your career. This isn't just another conference, it's an intensive 2-day summit where real partnerships form. We leverage the cutting-edge Partnering One platform to ensure that you'll connect with exactly the right people, whether you're seeking investors, research partners, or your next big opportunity. The future of biotechnology is being shaped right here in the broader Gulf South and having a global impact. Will you be part of it? Mark your calendar for October 28th and 29th. Head to bioonthebayou.com right now and secure your spot for the most exciting biotechnology event of 2025. The next breakthrough could be yours. Bio on the Bayou 2025. Register today.
in this episode of Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Ernesto Villarini. He's a managing director at the Community Development Venture Capital Alliance with extensive experience in development, finance, and economic development. So with that, welcome, Ernesto. It's great to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be here, Don. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. And would you mind just telling everybody just a little bit of, sort of what put you in this line of work? What is it that, made you be involved in development, finance, and venture capital?
Well, it's been a long and winding road with various, types of experiences, but, bear with me and it'll make sense. So my bachelor's is in biology, actually. I wanted to be a researcher and a scientist. My mother actually cultivated that in me. She used to be a biology teacher herself. But after I got into college, and I even, started a master's degree in science, I realized that I was more of a generalist than a specialist. And believe it or not, that's what took me to business administration. That and some job opportunities with a management consulting firm. And 12 years, with that firm taught me the importance of financing and access to capital. You as a startup or an experienced company, trying to grow and take advantage of opportunities in your market, might have the best product or service available out there. But if you're not able to get your hands on the capital needed to spur growth, particularly when it's high growth, you're really limited, And the benefits of developing a company in a location that is capital starved are missed as well, right? So it's not only a missed opportunity for a company, it's a missed opportunity, for a location and region that might see that founder and that company move away to where they have access to the capital that they need to grow. So seeing that, as part of my career, again doing management consultant is what got me interested in finance, and ended up doing my doctorate degree in trying to understand how growth and sustainable growth can be financed, and that's what I based my research on. The professional level, while I was doing my doctorate, I started working with an investment consulting firm. I went from management consulting to a lot of finance and investment work with that firm, and I worked exclusively with institutional clients. So these were foundations, endowments, corporations looking to develop, a diversified portfolio, but within their portfolio have some impact strategies. And that's what led me to CDVCA. CDVCA, the Community Development Venture Capital Alliance, ended up being the manager of a project that we built for one of our investment advisory clients. Ended up being a fund of funds made, and built to provide capital to businesses in locations, of course, to produce profits, and investment returns for our clients, but at the same time, put capital to work in that location, and that produces, an economic development effect. So, as I said, a long, winding, diverse road, but that's my background in a nutshell.
It really helps to sort of frame things up and hear how people wind up, sort of where they are as well. And yeah, so I'm just interested also in where do you think the kind of the key inflection points have been in your career, the key milestones for your career to sort of have led you to this point as well? Because I mean, it seems fairly significant, right, to go from biology to management consulting to finance, right? So, yeah, just also interested to hear more about the milestones that you sort of say that these were the key points of my career so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share with you three of those. So the first one is going back to the biology piece, and um, I went to the University of Florida to pursue a master's in zoology, and that turned into an inflection point because feeling that push of having to specialize in a very specific area within, biology and the sciences, really, that's what made me realize, this wasn't, for me. As I said earlier, I'm the Swiss Army type of guy, and that is very different from being, a staple or a laser, cut, which is, what most, scientists are driven to. That has changed, in the past 30 years. But yeah, back then, that's how it felt, and it was a pain for me. But I've always been very grateful of having that background because, and that also means that I understand what empirical research is and understand scientific methodology and use that, almost on a day-to-day basis. It also means that it makes me more comfortable when we see today deals in the pharma, in the biospace, and at least I, have that basic understanding of many of the things that I see in deals. So when I saw a pitch earlier today about RNA and DNA and how, that's different, those two are different, and how they relate, to cancer treatment. Again, I might not be a specialist, but I know, science well enough to relate, to the challenges that those companies are looking to address. I guess a second inflection point, came through my work in management consulting, and it came after a hurricane that hit Puerto Rico back in '99. This was Hurricane George. Seeing a lot of, the companies on the island trying to, rise back up after the impact of that hurricane, and seeing, the capital constraints, of what that meant for them was what really got me interested in the financing, part of the equation of, building back a business, or even after the disaster, being able, to have the access to capital needed, not just to grow back, but again, to take advantage, of some opportunities, and even experience that with the firm that I was working with, which was a local management consulting firm. And, we didn't have the financial backing that would allow us, to take advantage of opportunities that presented themselves back at that point, and then to see, companies come from outside Puerto Rico to take advantage of those same opportunities. yeah, that was definitely, a learning experience. And then finally, with the investment firm, this project I described earlier, which ended up being called the Puerto Rico Fund for Growth, was another, a turning point, meaning that I wanted to be, closer to the investment activity itself. It opened, my eyes to a lot of things. This was, 12 or 13 years ago, where at the investment firm, we designed the project conceptually. We did a lot of due diligence on the funds, that could be invested in. And we were able, to tell our client, yes, there is a project, that we can develop here and that you can dedicate some capital to, but we will have to bring, an outside GP to manage this because that type of knowledge, is not available on the island. And again, that's how I, became familiar with CDVCA, and their work, and held on to that relationship and that idea of being, on the other side, and being with the team, making the investments in both funds and in businesses, to promote, that approach of double bottom line investments and what we call place-based investments, right? Investing in companies, that can grow in a place and provide that both direct and indirect benefit in terms of economic development.
How has your position evolved, since you joined CDVCA?
Yeah. So when I joined CDVCA, I became a member of the CDVCA investment committee in about a year, and that was, the initial evolution as I finished my doctorate degree, and as I was, able to bring in additional resources in terms of, potential LPs, and potential funds to invest in. Again, this was, derived from my experience as an investment advisor. And then the most recent evolution, has to do, again, going back to my management consulting experiences, and is opening the doors at CDVCA to the opportunity to work directly with companies. And we designed an accelerator type program called Unlock Capital. But different from other accelerators is we focus on the capital raise and helping founders and entrepreneurs understand the capital raising process, the steps you have to go through, what it entails, and understanding the investor mindset. This helped, we've been able to work with over 60 companies now. And in addition to helping them access capital, it also, has to do with leveling the playing field, when it comes to the knowledge, that is required. As most founders that might be listening to this episode know, raising capital becomes, kind of like a job all unto itself, right? In addition to running the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely is a difference, or a different environment than most people, I would say, are normally used to, right? With trying to have to raise capital on top of, doing your normal day-to-day job, or, heavier tasks. And then, there's the added challenge right now where I feel like not only are we dealing with a more starved environment as well, it just, it's led to even more challenges for people overall. Can you explain a little bit more about the mission and the goals of CDVCA and how it impacts low income communities?
Yeah, happy to. Um, so, part of our mission is in our name, and as I've shared, a centerpiece of our activity has to do with our investments. As I mentioned, both in funds and directly into businesses. So that pillar of our organization is again part of our mission as a community development financial institution, a CDFI, we're one of a few CDFIs that use as their method making equity investments or near equity investments to promote economic development through business growth. And as you would expect, we look for those opportunities to invest in high growth businesses in locations throughout the country that would be considered underserved or underinvested. As many of the members in your audience know and they're familiar with, venture capital happens in Silicon Valley, it happens in New York, it happens in Boston in the biospace, and in a few other places, around the country is where most of the VC dollars flow to. Very little flows into other locations. Puerto Rico, Louisiana, where Bio New Orleans, where Bio on the Bayou is held, are examples of that. But then, we like the salmon swimming upstream, and against the current. Our organization and the members in our organization are those that have put it upon their shoulders to ensure that there is access, to some risk capital in these locations, because it has to be part of a larger, economic development strategy for those places. Economic development involves a whole bunch of things, but if part of your formula or solution includes research, innovation, entrepreneurship, that has to be supported by capital. If not, those companies, as I said at the beginning, end up moving where the money is, and you don't want to lose out on that opportunity. You want to develop those businesses in their locations for as long as time as it makes sense, from a business point of view, to do that. And that also means working with both public and private corporations, institutions, to have a supportive ecosystem, because it's not just about the capital, but we want to make sure that the capital is available, and that's part of the formula, and it's again our main driver. So in addition to that pillar, our other two pillars of work and ways in which we meet our mission is serving kind of like the trade association for other funds and other institutions, who have a similar investment, thesis. And then, as I mentioned, a third and more recent pillar is the work with the entrepreneurs, with the founders, and it's kind of like the other side of the coin, right? So you have the founder on one side, the investor on the other side, and we want to bring that investment and that investor knowledge to the entrepreneurs, so that again, they gain the knowledge required, they reach a certain comfort level, even with the language and the terminology, in addition to understanding the fundamentals, and making those connections, with angel groups, VCs, and other institutions that provide risk capital to grow their business.
Yeah, I do want to take a little bit of a pause here as well to just kind of acknowledge the fact that, I've worked for companies before that have had, in the life sciences space, that have had, fairly substantial, portion of the company in Puerto Rico, which, there was a lot of advantage for doing, at different times. And so, I definitely have seen it, in the businesses that I've been in, as well. And, for anybody that doesn't know, kind of what the biotechnology or even life sciences business, sort of stake is in Puerto Rico, can you talk a little bit about that? Kind of what is the landscape there, today for companies?
Yeah, in Puerto Rico, the industry still has, a very significant presence. It used to be, 20 years ago, more pharma than bio and life sciences, meaning, a lot of pharmaceuticals would set up, purely manufacturing operations here for, their main products, and there were, tax advantages that facilitated that. That all went away like almost 20 years ago, back in early 2000s. And the companies that stayed here, they stayed here, I guess mostly for two reasons. I could quite confidently say, because back then I was with the management consulting firm, and we actually had a lot of clients in this space. Uh, um, One of the reasons is the workforce. The fact still is that through its universities, Puerto Rico churns out engineers and scientists that are easier to recruit, for the companies that are here on the island, because they can bring them on to the company floor through internships and apprenticeships, and start up from there. And that still, remains a large factor for the bigger companies, that are still here on the island, like the Amgens and the Eli Lillys, and so forth. Um, the other reason, it's still a little bit of the tax advantages and facilitation, let's say, that the government of Puerto Rico provides. Puerto Rico is unique in terms of, as a U.S. territory, we work. Everything that's done on the island has to obviously meet all the federal government requirements, right? And we work within the federal framework. But I guess we get to have our own taxation, frameworks and programs, and get to provide, some incentives that produce some advantages. So it's again very unique in that sense, and also geographically, being the island being where it is, Puerto Rico is a port, between different commercial routes, and that makes sense, for some businesses to establish themselves here, even if a hurricane, comes along every now and then. It's still worthwhile for those two reasons.
Yeah, I mean, just the overall resilience and the ability for people to come back strong from a hurricane is something that I've not had to live through, thankfully, in my life. But at the same time, just watching, certain parts of the world, especially today, they're having to sort of do that quite frequently. I feel like. Puerto Rico's, definitely one of those places that comes to mind, and at least for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a topic, and where we and the people in New Orleans connect very well.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Come back.
So how does CDVCA balance its financial and social returns, and what are some of the success stories from your investments?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, and it's a great question because again, it's intermission, right? And if you want to be able to keep doing this work, and prove that your investment approach works, your thesis works, then you have to show the financial returns, because our LPs are usually institutional investors, and most institutional investors have a return obligation, either because they have to meet pensions, or they have to be able to meet, they have a return requirement they have to meet. So the financial side is definitely something that's strong and embedded in our approach. Again, being able to make good investments and produce those returns, whether it's through a fund of funds types project like I described. Puerto Rico Fund for Growth was not, in fact, CDVCA's first project. Before that, CDVCA managed the Innovate New York Fund, which is another fund of funds project that started up in 2012, and it actually is closing out as we speak. That fund of funds was a great success as well, because it accomplished both of the things that we're talking about. In other words, it provided capital to underlying funds that were investing in businesses mostly outside of the city. And for all that know New York, yes, I mean that is the case. Growing a business in the city is much different than growing a business, upstate. So it was, very interesting to see how each one of these funds invested in companies at different stages. Some, as early as pre-seed, out of the incubator stage. Some, at later stages. And overall, that project has produced 17x returns, which is, again, great when it's not great when you're comparing it to the top VC firms, that are out there. But when you think about, a project that again produces those financial returns, and in addition to that, you're creating 3,000 plus jobs in these economic sectors that will also have that indirect benefit of helping others grow within their town, within their county, or within their region. um, and seeing a couple of the companies again in the overall project become unicorns, and reach that status, is part of the success of that project. ACV Auctions is the largest IPO under that project, and they are out of Buffalo, New York, and they are still in Buffalo, New York, which is great because they've employed over 2,000 people in the city and in towns close to that, in Western New York area. Puerto Rico Fund for Growth has been another success story, but different, a little bit different from the New York project. The New York project was strictly VC. The Puerto Rico Fund for Growth is a mix between venture capital funds, private equity funds, and even some private debt funds. And it's a reflection of what some locations truly need in terms of growth financing that you want to make available outside the traditional business loan. And when I travel and when I meet with people in our network, and learn about other locations around the country, we see a similar need. So we'd like to think that there are opportunities, whether it's for regional organizations, like for example Appalachian Regional Commission, or the Delta Authority, to develop similar projects. Whether we're involved or not, that's secondary. What we want to see is more stories like this, and it could be a fund of funds, or it could be just a dedicated fund. Again, that's pursuing both the financial return and what we would call community development returns, or economic development returns, right? In the form of companies building wealth for that founder, and then creating those job opportunities that again help people stay in that location, and build on their own dreams in those locations, which is coming back to the example that you referred to of Puerto Rico earlier. It was great to see a lot of manufacturing and pharma and bio on the island. What was not so great is seeing support for more entrepreneurial activity in location, which is a challenge that many states face, because in various industries, you again see a lot of development in those industries, but you don't necessarily see entrepreneurial development in those locations, and it ends up feeling a little bit extractive. So when you think about oil and gas in Louisiana, that's a good example of that, right? I mean, uh, yes, it produces a lot of jobs, and that's great. But is there an intentional effort to
Mhm.
produce homegrown companies within that state, in that industry, taking advantage of that activity and leveraging that again to produce local companies?
Yeah, I think I mean, at least for the Gulf South, right? I mean, I feel like there's an entire allegiance of a lot of education on top of industry, sort of additive in those areas. But certainly, to your very good point, right? There are, ways that that you could definitely build as well, continue to build the area as well, just by sort of shaping, the right level of engagement as well from both the companies and the private sector. So what are some of the let me ask it this way. How do you source CDFI and NMTC investment opportunities, and what
Mm,
criteria do you use to select the projects for investment?
thanks for that question. Sourcing is, in fact, I think the part that I love the most about my job. You get, to meet so many interesting, and passionate founders and entrepreneurs, and and so many great opportunities, and investment opportunities. So on the venture capital side, it again, as a CDFI, very specific. When it comes to what you can invest in, it's because it's money from Treasury and the CDFI fund. The CDFI fund, is kind of like sets the rules, right? So what you're looking for are initially for businesses in what Treasury would consider a qualified investment area. And that's purely geographic, and it varies, from state to state what those qualified investment areas are, because it depends on the income levels, within the state. So they will, map out for all CDFIs what are, what would be considered a qualified investment area, and that can, vary from year to year as time goes on. But that's, the first thing that we look for. We look for, businesses in qualified in investment areas. The second thing that we're looking for is a co-investment opportunity. In other words, we want to see, an investment opportunity where there's someone already on board, looking at this investment, and pretty much setting up terms. Not because we want to see others set terms, but because we want to ensure that somebody is looking at this deal with the level of expertise, that it requires. Because we focus on low and moderate income communities, cannot afford to be experts in any field. We're looking, for the best investment opportunity in that location, no matter the industry. So it really falls on us to connect folks, with the investors, that can bring that expertise if they're still, not at the table. And so the referral process for us goes both ways. Many times it's through Unlock Capital that we're identifying a company, and presenting that to investors in our network, and trying to say, please take a look at this. We find it very interesting, but we need your expertise to like really complete diligence on this. And at the same time, they're approaching us and saying, hey, I like this opportunity. As you know, I'm in a place where I don't have many sources to go to, and I definitely don't want to be, the biggest player here, meaning, funds tend to set, limits, and this is part of the negotiation with their limited partners, their capital providers, in acknowledging that, you want to refrain from being more than 20 or 25%, as your usual limit in any one investment. And you don't want to be, you don't want an investment to be a large portion of your fund either, right? You have to limit your check size so that you truly have a diversified portfolio. So when you're, making that arrangement with your limited partners, with your investors, you have to, remind yourself, that on the other side, you have to bring in, be able to bring in additional capital, so that you're able, to meet, those requirements and stay within those limitations. So we often, get referrals that way as well, and because of that, so staying agnostic, and focusing, on these areas, where you would, consider them again underinvested, underserved, low and moderate income communities is helpful in that sense. And again, that's from the venture capital perspective. NMTC, New Market Tax Credit, it is also a CDFI fund and treasury program. So similarly, there's the investment area criteria to meet as well. And in our case, we're looking both, whenever we have allocation, and we've been fortunate enough to receive allocations 7 times in the past like 12 years. So, good ratio there, about, more or less 50% for every application we've thrown out. We're looking for standalone deals, where we could, provide the new markets tax credit piece, or we're looking to invest in companies through what we've built and we refer to as a revolving investment fund. Those are, smaller contributions to the capital stack, but the good thing there is, again, as implied in the name, it's revolving, and we're able to keep, having that activity. The other good thing, the important thing to mention about NMTC is that a lot of states have built, their own NMTC programs to match the federal program, so that leverages, additional dollars for businesses where those are in place.
Very good. So I want to focus a little bit on you. What's the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
Greatest piece of leadership advice that I've ever received. Wow, there are, okay. The first one that comes to mind came from former governor of Puerto Rico, Sila Calderon. And we had this discussion one day, and she pretty vehemently told me, you have to provide clear instructions to your team. And I cannot, I kind of like, really took that to heart. And this was 20 years ago, but this is something that I continue to do. Like, one of the keys to have a good performing team is to provide, clear instructions, and to do that in a way that lets your team know that you're not doing this because you don't trust them, or that you believe, that they don't have the skills. It's really to avoid a lot of mistakes that are often made because of assumptions that everybody has, right? And because everybody has different personalities, so they have different interpretations and they're focused on different things. So really validating with your team, what you decide together to do is really important. And again, this is not the I know you don't know what you're doing kind of thing. It's really about, again, validating that you are, meeting eye to eye, and you're understanding things the same way, and not leaving things up to chance, and being like really thorough in that sense. And at the same time, again, recognizing that by doing that, you're also giving them the opportunity to contribute, to the decision-making process, to the planning process, to the execution processes as well. So making sure, that conversation, that exchange happens, I think, is really important in leadership.
Very good. What inspires you?
Um, as I said earlier, sourcing deals is like the most exciting part of my work. And the reason for that is, that one of the things that really gets me when I'm looking at a company and an investment opportunity is the passion, that founder, that entrepreneur exhibits. So passion for, doing things and putting their product or their service out there is something that I really appreciate. And I can even say this, on its own value. In other words, irrespective of, what the business is meant to do. But I have to admit that I have a preference, when a business is meeting, a social need or environmental need, and there's that additional, benefit to what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. What concerns you?
The and I don't want folks to take this the wrong way, but the profit motivation is a concern, and I say that to convey to others that yes, it's a good thing, to make profit, and it's even, as I said earlier, a required thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about investing, right? Again, the financial return is important and has to be there. And a lot of folks, we have to remind ourselves that the largest investors in the marketplace are in fact the institutions. They're the pension funds, the CalPERS of the world. Those are, and for them, that financial return is important because, again, they're generating profits that will end up supporting the pension systems for teachers and workers, in again, whether they're in the public or in the private domain. But at the same time, whenever you see that knee-jerk reaction in the market, that fear is related, to that profit motivation, and then that's what I'm referring to, that concerns me, because in the current environment where you don't know, what comes next and what to expect, in the US or in the world, then that concern for, the potential loss of profit leads to decision making in the short term,
Mm,
and that tends to, undercut what needs to happen in the mid and long term.
yeah, absolutely. Last question. What excites you?
Um, I guess what excites me, and I'll just, keep it at the professional level, in my work, is the opportunity to work with others to level the playing field. I'm always, excited about having the opportunity to help others, reach goals and dreams, that might not be as easy to reach because they don't have the resources, at hand, or because they're trying to build something at a place that might not, have, again, all the resources available to make that happen. So whenever we can contribute, and help level that playing field, I find that exciting.
Yeah, well, Ernesto Villarini, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast and for sharing that with us, along with all of your other insights about the investment through CDVCA and all the exciting work that you guys are doing. And I really appreciate you being on.
Uh, Thanks for having me again, Dawn. And folks who might want additional information, you'll find us, through our website, online, LinkedIn, or Facebook pages, the Community Development Venture Capital Alliance, CDVCA. If you want to learn about our accelerator program, Unlock Capital, you'll find that as well, unlockcapital.org, or on LinkedIn, or Facebook.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.